I want you to imagine this. You are at an imperial banquet. The table is laden with every delicacy you can think of. Wine flows in streams, but you are in no condition to eat a single bite. Your hand is trembling so violently while holding your goblet that you have to hide it under the table to keep from spilling the wine. Why? Because the man at the head of the table, the most invincible human on earth, just took your beloved wife by the arm and led her behind closed doors. You are there, but you are frozen. The 50 powerful senators around you are just like you, sitting there like statues. Some are praying for the woman to come out of that room safe and sound. You are just begging and praying that she doesn't say a single wrong sentence that will get you both executed tonight. Those 20 minutes, they feel like 20 long years. And finally, when the door opens and you see him return, what do you think happens? It doesn't end with him just leaving your wife back at your side. The man sits down, calmly pours himself some wine, and then, looking into the eyes of everyone sitting at that table, your friends, your rivals, one by one, he begins to describe openly exactly what he did with your wife in the room he just left. Disgusting, graphic, clinical details, like a doctor describing a surgery. Your colleagues look down at the floor in shame. Your wife stares into the void as she listens. And you smile calmly. Yes, smiling is your only option. You must nod your head and be grateful to him for this honor. If you happen to frown or make a single objection, there will be no future for your children to live in. Look, history books call this madness. But no, this wasn't madness. This was a unique machine. It was a flawless system designed to tear the human soul apart with surgical precision, and the man responsible for building this system was named Caligula. Today, I'm not just going to tell you about a ruthless emperor. I am going to tell you how, 2,000 years ago, one human being turned an entire empire into his own massive psychological torture experiment. If you are ready, sit back, because what you are about to hear will get worse with every step. And do you know what the truly terrifying part is? Caligula died, but the machine he left behind kept on working. Before we understand how Caligula's terrible terror machine worked, I have to say something very important. This man wasn't born evil. Evil was processed into him. Let's rewind the film a bit to when he was 7 years old. The year is 14 AD. Imagine a tiny child, 6 or 7 years old, running around a Roman military camp. A miniature military uniform has been sewn for him, complete with tiny red boots on his feet. The hardened soldiers, who have conquered half the world, play with this child and adore him. Do you know the nickname they gave him? Caligula, which means little boots. His father, Germanicus, is the greatest hero since Julius Caesar. The soldiers practically worship the father, and they adore the child. He is the army's mascot, their good luck charm. The child thinks he is in the safest place in the world, surrounded by an invincible army. But 1 year later, the great nightmare will begin, and the child has no idea. His father dies suddenly. According to official reports, illness. But the whispers say something completely different. Poison. And the whispers go even further, claiming the poison was ordered by the emperor himself. And when Caligula is just 8 years old, that system begins to finish off his family. Before his eyes, his mother is dragged from their home and exiled. His eldest brother is thrown into prison, and he is neglected so badly there that he dies trying to eat the stuffing from his own mattress to survive. His other brother? He is taken to a dungeon and subjected to such incredible torture by the guards that he smashes his own head against the stone walls to commit suicide just to escape the pain. They destroy them all, one by one, and little Caligula is forced to watch all of this happen in silence. By the time he is 19, he is the only one left of a massive family tree. Just when he thinks it's over, that famous invitation arrives from the palace. Emperor Tiberius wants to see him. Where? The Isle of Capri. To an outsider, this place is a paradise, but to an insider, it is Tiberius's personal island of horrors. The emperor has grown old, paranoid, surrounded himself with deviants, and turned into a monster who invents new methods of torture just to keep from getting bored. Think about it. You are in the same place as the man who slaughtered your family. Young Caligula learns something very important there. He knows Tiberius murdered his family, but he must hide it. One wrong look, one single tear, one sign of anger, and his head will roll. So he doesn't just try to survive, he perfects it. The historian Suetonius writes a chilling sentence about him. There never was a better servant, nor a worse master. Caligula learns to sever ties with everything human inside him right there. He watches, he takes notes, he learns directly from his master how a monster thinks, how to manipulate people. And when Tiberius dies in 37 AD, some say Caligula smothered him with a pillow. That 19-year-old hostage becomes the most powerful man on earth. The people of Rome hold feasts in the streets. They think, the son of our hero has come, we are saved. Poor souls. They are unaware that they are seeing a savior in someone who has lived with the greatest psychopath in Roman history and transformed into a monster just like him. And for the first 7 months, everything goes like a dream. He lowers taxes, organizes games. But then a mysterious illness grips him. He writhes in fever for days, and the person who got up from that bed was not the same person who lay down in it. Something had snapped in his brain, and Rome was about to learn, in a very painful way, what would happen when he took off that smiling mask. What I'm about to tell you might sound like madness, but if you look closely, you will realize it is a system. Caligula launched a 5-stage war to destroy the human spirit. Let's get to know these stages one by one. Act 1. The sister goddess and mandatory mourning. You've heard of his sister Drusilla. There are rumors of an incestuous relationship between them. Whether true or not is irrelevant. What matters is this. When Drusilla died, Caligula mourned her very differently than a normal human would. He forced the entire empire to experience his personal pain. First, he forced the Senate to declare his sister a goddess. Literally, he had temples built. Then he declared a period of public mourning. But here is the blood-curdling detail. Laughter was banned. Bathing was banned. Even eating dinner with your family was banned. Imagine, you laughed at your child playing games at home. The punishment? Execution. For weeks, people spoke in whispers even inside their own homes. What Caligula wanted to see was this. My emotions will be your only reality. If I am sad, none of you dare to be happy. Act 2. The Imperial Pleasure House. This is where bureaucracy meets cruelty. He set up a brothel inside the palace that the public could enter. Just like a government office, entrance fee, receipts issued. But ordinary slaves didn't work inside. The wives of senators, the daughters of governors, the children of Rome's most noble, untouchable families. There were even price lists announced in the streets. This much for a senator's daughter, that much for married women. And I'm telling you, the most terrifying part, he kept a ledger. Who was sold to whom, for how much? He noted it all down like an accountant. For a father, knowing his daughter was written in that book like a piece of merchandise, and being unable to oppose it. The man didn't stop at bodies. He was polluting the lineage and legacy of the Roman aristocracy with his own filth. Act 3, The Predator's Banquet. That dinner scene I told you about at the beginning, that had become a routine, taking wives away in front of their husbands' eyes and bringing them back to comment on them. Why was he doing this? Sexual impulse? No, it was purely a show of power. Those powerful senators, those untouchable men, were rendered helpless against his actions. He was telling them, "Your honor, your manhood, your fatherhood, they all exist between my two lips. You exist only as long as I allow it." Social values, family, trust, they were all destroyed at that table every single time. Act 4, The Grieving Father, the peak of emotional torture. But I think the most sickening moment happened in the 4th act. Even modern psychologists have studied this event. One day, just out of boredom, he has a wealthy man's son executed, and that very evening he invites the father to the palace for dinner. Think about it. Your son's body has just been hung in the street. There hasn't been time to mourn. And his killer invites you to dinner. You have no choice but to go. The father sits at the table. What does Caligula do? He stares at the father, watching him. Like a scientist watching a lab rat in an experiment, he is waiting for a single tear, a single tremble of the lips. Because if he sees the father cry, Caligula will feel he hasn't won. He will think there is still some humanity left that hasn't been destroyed. And just for that, he will take the man's life. Do you know what that father did? He laughed. He made jokes. He joked with the emperor and laughed out loud at his quips. While living the pain of his child inside, he had to play a role he never wanted just to stay alive. Caligula had ruthlessly turned even that sacred love between father and child into fear. But Caligula, like every tyrant, couldn't escape that classic mistake. He succumbed to hubris. When he humiliated politicians and nobles, they knew how to swallow it because they were politicians. They had property to lose. But Caligula directed his cruelty at the wrong man, a soldier, Cassius Chaerea, commander of the Praetorian Guard, the unit tasked with protecting the emperor, a tough man who had spent a lifetime on the front lines, whose hands were calloused from swinging a sword. But Chaerea had a thin, high-pitched voice, and Caligula made this an obsession. Every day he mocked the man's voice, made feminine jokes at him. In fact, every morning when Chaerea came for the military password exchange, he would give him sexually explicit, humiliating passwords like Venus, goddess of love, or Priapus, god of fertility, to be humiliated constantly in front of his soldiers. Caligula saw this as just a joke. For Chaerea, every joke was another drop in an already overflowing cup. Caligula had forgotten the most basic rule of nature: never corner an animal that has the teeth to kill you. That January 24th, 41 AD. Caligula is enjoying a play at the theatre. Around noon, he enters that dark, narrow underground tunnel to go to the palace. Chaerea and the other conspirators are waiting there, and Caligula suspects nothing. Seeing Chaerea, Caligula makes one final joke. That becomes his last word. Chaerea shouts, "You deserve this. Take this," and plunges his sword. Because the tunnel is narrow, there is nowhere to run. The others swarm in. Sources mention 30 blows landing on his body. 4 years of accumulated rage, fear, and hatred end in a 60-second destruction. The monster is dead. But the story doesn't end here. I wish it did, because the machine had already spun out of control. It no longer recognized innocence. Soldiers storm the palace in a blood-thirsty rage. Caligula's wife, Caesonia, is brutally killed where she stands. Then they enter the nursery. Caligula's daughter, Julia Drusilla, a baby barely 2 years old. They lean over the baby's crib, and that night they leave no one from Caligula's bloodline alive. Even that little child pays the price for her father's sins. The justification? So she won't grow up and try to take revenge. The system devours everything attached to it. When things calmed down, the soldiers began to loot the palace. One of them saw a pair of trembling feet hiding behind a curtain. They pulled the curtain back. The person hiding was the uncle, Claudius, a stutterer, lame, seen as the disgrace and the idiot of the family. The soldiers looked at him. Claudius thought he was going to die. But instead of attacking him, the soldiers hoisted him onto their shoulders and proclaimed him the new emperor. While the Senate was thinking of returning to a republic, the army had already chosen the emperor. The system survived. Do you know what disturbs me most about this story? Caligula's reign lasted only 4 years. If you look at the vast history of Rome, 4 years is nothing. But 2,000 years later, we are still talking about him. Why? Because Caligula showed us the dark side of power. He turned all the mechanisms of the state, the law, the army, the economy, into a torture device for himself. Every cruelty he committed was legal, because he was the law. And after his death, Claudius had all of his remaining records burned. So these horrific events I'm telling you about right now are only what is remembered. Can you imagine the things that were erased, lost, and forgotten? Caligula was a blueprint, and that blueprint never disappeared. It just changed hands. In Nero, in Commodus, and in all the tyrants of history, we have always witnessed the footsteps of those little boots. Here we are faced with that inevitable question. Are monsters really hiding under our beds? Or do we create them by putting those red boots on them and seating them on the throne?